My talk this morning is going to be about Svelte and how to use Svelte within Drupal. Once you figure out how to use Svelte within Drupal, then your creativity can go all over the place. I'll be talking about micro apps basically, but the whole idea about micro apps is for you to build dynamic front-end experiences. My name is Myke. I'm a software developer. I enjoy using.
I'm awfully sorry, but if you adjust the microphone, it's hard to hear with the construction noise outside. So
okay.
That's better.
Back away from it a little bit, so it's like the cone is facing.
Oh, okay.
There. Yeah.
It's much better, I guess.
Thanks.
I'm Myke. I'm a software developer. I enjoy making use of new technologies. I've been using Svelte for the last two and a half years. And the beauty about Svelte is that it's quite straightforward. If you've programmed in JavaScript and you know JavaScript, you don't need to learn a lot to start using it. That's the beauty about it. So I'm not here to but maybe after this presentation, you could probably go try it out. So the agenda for today is just going to talk about micro apps generally, why Svelte and Vite, especially for the developer experience. Then how Svelte, Vite, Drupal all come together. Then we shall go through some the code. I have some code. There's a, just in case you're interested in the code, there's a GitLab repository which you can go to and have a look at the code. And then I do have a demo, just a sample micro app that I'll take you through, and maybe we can also look at its code as well. Then also feel free to ask questions. I mean, we don't need to reach the end. We can see Q&As at the end, but I prefer it's more interactive, and you can always ask questions as we move forward. So why this talk? Why am I having this talk? I'm trying to essentially convince Drupal folks that if you want to build interesting applications, especially micro apps within Drupal, you can use Svelte. For far too long, we use jQuery, which does great. But there's so much you can do with that, especially the amount of time you take to develop a micro app using jQuery will definitely take you much more time than if you use something like Svelte and Vite. And now with Vite you leverage things like hot module reload. And you have a development server go at the background. So those are things that bring better developer experience as you develop within Drupal. And then, of course, there was a period, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, when this whole decoupled, what people are talking about decoupled, being decoupled, let's go decoupled, and that and so forth. You don't have to go through all that anymore. You could probably use a micro app and still stay within Drupal, but not to go fully decoupled, and so that's another advantage as well. So micro apps are basically just independent focused front-end applications embedded within the Drupal ecosystem. They bring modularity, fast load, and independent deployments. I can imagine if you're building a Drupal, a custom Drupal module, you probably have your developers who are good at PHP. So you might say, okay, let those continue doing their PHP bit, and the JavaScript side, you might say, you know, let's have developers do the JavaScript side, which might be the Svelte kit side, and you could have this work independently and be able to deploy the custom application, the custom module as well. So those are some of the benefits, and of course, most of us here have used Vite, especially those from the React.js side. Many of them have used Vite, so they come with that knowledge and experience on how to use Vite and the benefits of Vite. I'm not going to talk so much about Vite per se, because Vite, many of us, especially if you've used some of these frameworks, you very likely have used Vite, especially for developer experience. The bit that I want to talk about here is Svelte. Svelte comes in the Svelte and Svelte kit. This presentation, right, is a Svelte kit application. And Svelte as Svelte itself is quite intuitive. I mean, if you're developing JavaScript and you just look at a simple Svelte application, you can really you get the impression that you've used you can easily develop it in Svelte. So and the magic about Svelte is that when you compile it, it compiles to JavaScript, so you don't have the overhead of, say, virtual DOM, and that's what has made it a challenge. For instance, if you needed to build a React.js micro app, it came with a lot bundled, you know. At Svelte, I mean, you just build, compile, and then it's just a normal JavaScript file. So it's much smaller and much easier to deploy and move around. So within Drupal, since we are in Drupal, we're in a Drupal conference, really, the focus will be mainly on Drupal and how to build this Svelte app within Drupal. So a number of things need to happen. On the Drupal side, Drupal will do what it does: routing, permissions, exposing data via JSON API or REST. That's the most important bit, especially exposing the data, because that's how you get your data to the app. You need your JSON API, REST, and then this Svelte bit, the micro app bit, is just basically for user interface, building components and interaction and event handling, really. So that's the strategy, really. So Drupal does what it does, and then the data comes out. We use JSON API, pass the data to the micro app. Can you see this?
That's cool.
Yeah. So the folder structure for the dev workflow really is quite straightforward. You have your custom module, say my module. and then in there you have a separate folder called micro app for your micro app. I mean, you could technically have everything. I mean, you don't need to have the micro app folder really, but I prefer having a separate folder for it. And then the rest are the standard Drupal custom module folders like templates and source and so forth and so on. And then the development workflow is you use Vite. From Vite, npm. You have your development server running. You can develop your micro app on the side, and also the Drupal custom module on the other side. So you have two separate, if I might put it, development workflows. One for the Drupal side, one for your micro app as well. And then in your templates, you have a Twig file where you define. You could have multiple Twig files, depending on how many apps you have within your custom module, and you just define entry points, if I might, entry points within the Twig file for each of your micro apps. So the integration with Drupal is actually quite straight. It's not that complicated. It's very straightforward actually, and that happens through the libraries, the YAML file. When you're building your app, your micro app using Vite, when you're building it, you just make sure that the JavaScript and the CSS align to what is defined in your .libraries file. That's pretty much it.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
So in cases with like React, like specifically with React, where they create chunks,
Yeah.
and every time you make an update to that app, you get a different file name basically. How do you? I don't think we want to have to update the library definition every single time. Is there a way to automate that in a sense?
I'll come to that. Somewhere. I'll show you. There's what they call the Vite config file, where you define the output and the output folder and everything, and that's where that bit will come in. So the library file, the libraries.yaml file, this is how you define your. Now the output micro app distribution, this.js, all that is defined in that Vite config file that we'll look at some point later. So to create your micro app, you basically just need Vite. If you've used Vite before, whether it's in React or vanilla JavaScript, or the process is pretty much the same. It's npm create Vite latest, and then you select the project name. Right here, I did include TypeScript as well, and then it scaffolds basically your micro app really, and in this case I called it app, and that's it. And it's available localhost 5173, and that's the beauty that you're able to develop the micro app separately and test it and be able to, without necessarily having to be tied to the Drupal side. So you can develop separately, and then at some point when you want to integrate, you build a production. You build production up, and then that's when you can be able to start to test it with the Drupal as well. So this is just the Vite config file that I was talking about, you did ask about that. At its simplest, I'll show you in the code. I have one that's a bit more detailed, but at its simplest, you're saying, I want my output to go to js.index.js. That's for the JavaScript, and for the asset file CSS to be called that. And this is what to make sure that whenever you build, that's what it will always come to. And make sure that in your libraries.yaml file, this is what it's pointing to. That way you don't have to, you technically don't need this, because you can, if you feel, at the beginning I used to manually copy and paste, but then it became overly, it becomes a bit tedious, copying or building. Now you build, then you're not sure, did you copy the last time? Did you copy the right one? Did you make the changes? So I think it's sometimes much easier to configure this within the Vite config, and so that when you run npm build or npm build, and you know that at least the changes have moved there. But you technically don't need to do this. You can manually copy paste if you want to. So to build, you find out then of course npm run build. This is as you can see, when you run a build, it also has there's this bit here which is there's this index file, index.html file that is created as well. In the repository, in the config, Vite config, I've also included a function that gets rid of this, because you technically don't need this anymore. Because sorry?
You're doing it in Twig.
Yeah, because we are going to use Twig for this. So again, the config file, we shall take a look at it, and you'll see that you actually can also write a function within Vite to get rid of index.html, so that you have much. So that for your build, you only just have your CSS and the JavaScript. So the most important thing to get out of here is the libraries.yaml file, and how you align this path here, right here, for the CSS and for the JavaScript. So the next is on the entry point in the Twig the Twig file. That's where you have to define the entry point. It could be that's the most important bit also, because if you don't have that defined, the app won't appear anywhere. And then the Vite config bit automates most of the build, what you want to build, the directories. It will go to the names of the asset files, the JavaScript files, because in your libraries.yaml file you want those assets to be referenced, and then the micro app itself. So just for quick code walkthrough. This is on GitLab. So if we just go to the first bit, is the micro app, the Twig file, nothing so special about it. I just have this div here, and the ID app. So my Svelte kit will basically be your entry point, really. So the beauty here is that you could potentially have more than one micro app
There's different ideas.
And you just define different IDs, and you can have one that does this, one that does the other, just different entry points really. And then I have a controller here. This is in the Drupal side. Just some basic data, just not so much really. We could have used the JSON API, but I decided to just create a controller that which one of the apps will make use of this data here. And then the app itself, if we go to the app itself, and then the library, this is also the library's YAML file you can see. And so make sure that it points to the app. You could configure your Vite to get rid of this as well. This list if you don't want it there as well. But this is then the app is what we are interested in today. Let's start with the Vite config file. So in this Vite config file, this first function here just essentially just gets rid of that HTML file when I'm doing a build, because I don't need it. So I mean, even if it creates, it doesn't do anything to the app, but I just feel it might be, especially when you're pushing this to Git and you really need that. And then the rest is the different targets, the entry file, JS, that, and so forth. So this is where you define the names of the index of JS that you want, the names that you want the files to be called, and the asset as well. I think it's quite straightforward. And then if we go to the app itself, I did add a few routes in there, nothing so special. I mean, all these are different components. There's a map, there's a dashboard, there's a post, and so forth and so on. And this is just typical Svelte, but as you can see, it might look like anything that you've done before. It doesn't look. If you look at it, I mean, if you've used React or any of the, I mean, it just looks like something that you've done before. So there's a dashboard.svelte. These are just components. This does nothing but, again, on mount, they're just life cycle hooks, just like in React. Component gets mounted. Go to that controller endpoint that I just showed you about, get the data, and then present it, and that's it. It's not so different from what you've done before. This is very typical Svelte code, but as you can see, it's not so different from. So the script, you write all your JavaScript in in Svelte. What happens that you write all your JavaScript within the Svelte tags, the script tags, and then HTML comes down write your HTML anywhere after that, and then your CSS is written as a style. So you have one file like this for CSS. This is how you define it, and HTML. HTML. You write it the way you write HTML, and then with the components here. This is now like the component here. This Svelte component. These are props. I show you this because I'm trying to convince you that there isn't any complexity in switching over from what you know already to using Svelte.
Can I ask a quick question about you showed the routes.
The routes.
Is the idea that someone visits the micro app, Drupal serves up the initial bundle at whatever route it's specified at, and then the Svelte app is handling the other routing? So the other routing that you define in the routes file, that gets sort of intercepted by the Svelte app, and it does its routing there. Drupal's kind of unaware of.
Yeah, Drupal is unaware of that routing.
Yeah.
This is just routing for my micro app.
Yeah.
It's possible that you have a micro app that has 3, 4, 5 different routes that you want your users to go to. So this is just an example. For instance, you can say I have a dashboard and a map, and these are different components, and I wanted the micro app to the users to be able to route between the different components, if I may put it that way.
So just based on like that question, instead of using the micro app routing, would it make sense to use Drupal routing and have individual apps for whatever scenario that you're trying to solve for? Just so that we're still within the Drupal ecosystem and the API and taking full advantage of it. Just a random question, sorry.
I can see where that is definitely useful, because the major difference here is that this is a micro app, and the micro app has components, and in this example I was just creating routes to those different components. But I can see a situation where you might have micro apps on different endpoints, then that might be a use case.
And another follow-up question, how does this work with Drupal caching?
Yeah, that's a good one, because right now when you bust a cache, Drupal clear cache, the assumption is, remember, let me just go back here just one step. Most of your content comes out of this, the control. As I said, use REST API to get most of your code data from there. The micro app, all it does is present what you're giving for using from REST. So the assumption is that if you change anything on the Drupal side, the app just presents what is given to it. So, yeah.
I was just going to say, in terms of like the routing stuff, I think that the big difference is with the Drupal routes. I mean, you're talking about like the actual path in the browser versus so if you want to have a different path in the browser, then that might be the way to go. But if what you're wanting to do is to have the app within the page be able to do different things and respond differently, you would have the routes within Svelte to handle that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, so out of the box, the Svelte routes don't change
No.
the URL.
It just changes
That's what was
what's
confusing
showing
me, is
up.
how was the,
We use the terminology path more, you know, for
Yeah.
like what's there and what, so they're two different concepts.
yeah,
Yes.
I just want to add, basically these things adding the micro application, adding the JavaScript-based application. Once it's landed on the Drupal page, everything is driven by JavaScript. It's
Mhm.
not Drupal anymore.
Right.
Caching, everything, the only thing that Drupal does is serve the data through the JSON API. The rest is just JavaScript query. The browser is never leaving the page once it's
Right.
landing on it, even though it got routing everything on it. It just simulate the URL change. Itself actually JavaScript browser never below the page. It stay on the page. The content inside the application changed. That's how React.js or those JavaScript framework works. It's two things actually. It's bringing the old, adding new technology into the old Drupal stuff.
Say micro app's a single page application is what it is.
Correct.
Standing alone in
Correct.
some block or wherever you put it.
Yeah, sometimes you want that.
Yeah.
You definitely
Yeah.
want it.
So,
So much reloading everything.
Exactly. You sometimes want that, especially when you don't want to go fully decoupled.
Right.
Yeah, you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
It's definitely something I'm looking for a while. I want every year. I just don't know how to do it.
Yeah, so especially 5-6 years ago, when there was a lot of when we went through decoupled, it was a bit complicated, but right now this might be what, a hybrid, if I might put it that way.
Partially.
Yeah. I think that is it through the code. But feel free to go through it, the repository. Feel free to go through it and let me know if you have any questions for that as well. So I have here just a quick micro app demo and poof. Okay, so now the micro app obviously is served of this Drupal route. And then so these are the routes that we talked about. Yeah. So this is a simple dashboard. Yeah. With some Apex dot. Has anyone used Apex? Apex.js dashboard visualizations?
What's the name of it?
It's called, let me see.
Apex charts.
Apex charts.
Oh. Okay.
You've used Apex charts?
There's a Drupal module for it as well.
Okay.
That integrates with the charts module.
Okay. So there's also a Svelte Apex charts the library as well. So this just goes to show you that you can do some very nice visualizations. Micro apps are specifically good for things like dashboards.
Mhm.
Yeah. Then I have this one as well. This is. Has anyone used Markbox before?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a typical Markbox. JS. Yes. Simply load that there. Yeah, this one is something happened. This part. So you can imagine having to do this in vanilla JavaScript or anything. I mean, you could do it, but it's quite a bit of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Svelte, I mean, it's much easier to do things something like this. And then there are these posts which can come from that controller that I showed you before. Can do some quick search here. Should be able to filter through these posts as well. Then you can go back home. Just this is the routing. Just keep going through the different routing. That's pretty much it. Questions?
So, have you tried using, do you use like Lando or DDEV for local development? I see you're not using it there. Have you tried using that to, there's, you know, it's a Docker abstraction that runs.
Yes, I've used Land as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you make that work? I mean, when you have that separate application, it's got its, you know, whatever, where it's being served from when you're working on it, like you can actually pull it up independent of your Drupal, right? You can just developing that individually. How do you get to talk to it? How?
With Lando, I'm trying to recall what I had to go through, especially. On Lando, I'm just trying to call what. But for instance, because you're talking about the REST, I mean, you could, because the development, I mean, Vite, when you're running the dev server, because that's on localhost, right, on your browser. So what you probably need to figure out how to point your Vite application. Sorry.
Oh, I kind of have a quasi answer to it, both in DDEV and in Lando. Mm-hmm. What I tend to do for my NPM environment is actually do an alias, so it runs it through that environment. Okay. So like I create an alias for NPM, it's like DDEV NPM, and that way all my commands are actually running inside the container, inside that environment. And then in the Vite config, you can actually use, if you do, I can't remember if it's DDEV status and Lando info, I think it gives you all the URLs. If you just put that into your Vite config, you can serve it from that internal URL. Yeah. And the nice thing about that is then all your dependencies for that local, like if you have a different NPM version for that project, you can actually be running it inside that project as something that's kind of mapped to it. So.
Do you have any code for that anywhere? Do you have any you could share? That's like the key piece that's kind of missing for me right now to the wiring, that last little bit of wiring, you know.
I might for City of Portland that's public. I'll take a look and see if I can share it.
Awesome.
Okay. I'll drop it into the GovCon Slack.
All right. I'm not on that. For some reason.